And after that last talk, I feel compelled to quote Monty Python and say, and now for something completely different. Thanks so much for having me today. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our organization. We're a brand new organization, and we are very much looking forward to working with our community, including economists, to determine our programming going forward as an organization. So I'll tell you just a little bit about how we are and then some opportunities to collaborate, how we're viewing what we want to do in both research and as well as work in the pre-competitive space, and I'll talk a little bit about the pre-competitive space, and then talk about our big data initiatives and how we're thinking about that. So we're a 501c3 organization, a private nonprofit, but we were born out of the Farm Bill. So in 2014, they established the foundation, much like other government agencies that have a associated 501c3, the USDA did not. So we were created in 2014, and we received the great gift from all of you, the American people, of $200 million to start our organization. We're designed really to fund and develop unique partnerships to support innovative science addressing today's agricultural needs. So because we are a nonprofit associated with the USDA, we have as part of our mission to complement the USDA and advance their mission. So we work very, very closely with the USDA, both as a fundraising arm for the USDA, but also because we're an independent organization with our own funds to work in areas of mutual collaboration. And also independently on ideas and areas where we can move forth with the academic community, the private sector, and with the other government agencies. So we have an incredible board of directors who actually was there before I joined. I joined about 10 months ago, last September. And on our board we have ex officio members, which include the Secretary of Agriculture and the Chief Scientist, as well as the head of NSF, France Cordova, our Chief Scientist, Kathy Witecki, of course, Tom Vilsack, our Secretary of Agriculture, Sunny Ramaswamy, who is the head of NIFA, and Shavonda Jacobs-Young, who is the head of ARS. And then we have an incredible board, which we're actually expanding now to include more private sector input, that is composed of individuals from academia. We're heavy on academia right now, but we're adding those members from the private sector. But we do have private sector representation, as well as other NGOs and other organizations, as well as producers and or growers. And I will tell you, there's never been a more dedicated group of people as these people. They are just an absolute delight to work with. We're chaired by former Secretary Dan Glickman, and he has been so supportive of our organization and really wants to see us become successful. So we have our research areas were spelled out in the Farm Bill, but we have honed them down a bit, and we're further honing them down. But we basically cover almost all of agriculture, all the way from on-farm animal and plant production, soil health, water use efficiency, to nutrition and health, and food production systems, and food system innovation through post-harvest processing. Now, we can see, though, however, you don't see the word economics in here anywhere, but we do cover the full gamut, and we are an organization that looks for white spaces and gaps. So our research is also very dependent on being at the further end towards the applied end. And many of these programs will include economic and other social components, because we want to see the research apply to help farmers, to produce nutritious, healthy food, to help preserve the environment, et cetera. So we have expectations that economic and other social science research will be a key component of what we fund. So how do we work? Well, we work in a number of ways. First of all, we convene stakeholders and thought leaders in collaboration. This is what we call convening events. I just came from one yesterday in Florida, where we convened experts to talk about the phytobiome and where we were going to go in the phytobiome. We love to come to meetings like this, where we can get ideas from the community of where we can go forward. We fund cutting-edge research through grants and challenges. So as an organization that is a private organization but a funding organization as well, we can launch competitive programs where we put out requests for applications. We can directly fund great ideas that we see if there's a partnership that's been established between the private sector and the academia or government. And we can also provide prizes and challenges. So we can do some really fun stuff. And in the area of data and other technologically oriented areas, we can actually offer prizes where the community will go out and work on projects, and those that are viewed most highly will receive a prize. So those are important things. Now, one of the things that's most important to us is to build these unique public-private partnerships. And not only do we aspire to do that, but we're required to do that. Aspire and require. I didn't realize I was a poet. But we are required to match our funding in order for us to launch programs. So this is a really unique challenge because we have the great gift from you of the $200 million, but as a new organization, we have to raise $200 million in a quite rapid time. So we're always looking for those private-public partnerships where industry and other private sector groups will work with us, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of how to develop those private-public partnerships in a minute. We build human capacity, so we are responsible for thinking about the next generation of agricultural scientists who can work in agriculture and address the forever changing and issues that we're going to be faced with. And we utilize social, physical, and biological science to answer our research questions, and we generate outcomes from the results of our funded research. So we really expect to have those outcomes applied, and oftentimes in our request for applications, we will say how the research is going to be extended into application. So I don't need to mention our convening events, but let me just tell you a few programs that are going on, sort of to give you a taste of what we've done. Because we're a 501c3 and we can launch rapidly, we've developed a rapid response program whereby if commodity groups or other organizations are facing an impending crisis situation in agriculture and food production, they can come to us and ask for a match to do some really seminal research that will get to the heart of the issue very quickly. So, for example, had we been in existence through the avian flu crisis a couple years ago, we might have been able to launch some key piece of research really rapidly that will allow us to address the issue. We're funding the next generation of scientists. We're about to give out 10 grants for new innovators. Those are individuals at the first part of their academic careers where we're giving them a quite substantial award to keep them firmly implanted in agriculture. Entrenched. I can use a lot of agricultural words, but one of the issues facing agricultural scientists is that there is not a lot of money for competitive funding. And often they're entrepreneurs like all of us, so when they become a faculty member, they have to seek out funding for their research programs. And oftentimes they direct their research towards agencies that have funding to support them. And believe me, having come from an agency that has $32 billion worth of competitive programs each year, there's a lot of people across the gamut of disciplines that will redirect their research towards the biomedical in order to seek and secure funding. So we wanted to give these individuals at the early part of their career a substantial award that allows them to do innovative and perhaps risky research that will keep them on a great steady path towards becoming firmly established agricultural scientists. And there's a couple other programs we're launching, soil health and some others. But I did want to mention that you may have heard last week, we in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation launched the first ever prize at the National Academy of Sciences for food and agricultural scientists. So we have had food and agricultural scientists win awards at the National Academy, but there's never been a prize dedicated to food and agricultural scientists. So this is a $100,000 award for an annual recipient who is in their mid-career. So they have to be within 25 years of their PhD or advanced degree. And we're really excited about this. We're looking forward to the first conferring of this award, and actually the nominations just opened yesterday. So if you have some individuals, and includes agricultural economics is one of the areas it includes. So if you have an individual who is mid-career that's really made an impact on agriculture and food production, please consider nominating them. And then there's a whole bunch of other programs that we're in the midst of working through, but I don't really have time to go through them. You feel free to peruse our website or to get a feel about how we're approaching things. So there's a couple of things that are under development, and one of them is big data. So I wanted to talk about that in a moment. We also are considering areas where we can actually put out challenges. So if you think about what is a challenge is something whereby we have a specific outcome in mind. So for example, we have what we think we're going to call the protein challenge, which allows a full gamut of individuals from all sorts of disciplines to participate with creative ideas. The protein challenge is that we know we have to produce food for 9.5 billion people, and how are we going to increase protein through either meat production, through alternatives to meat production, through economics to make things more economical, to reducing food waste, et cetera. So we're going to have a number of challenge areas that will have all sorts of components, including the social and economic components to them. So keep your eyes out for those. So as I mentioned earlier, private-public partnership is one of our keys here, and we really need to find out a way to work in the pre-competitive space. And so we have thought about what this pre-competitive space means, and we know that we will be able, and we already have partnered with many of these different types of groups, which is food companies, seed and chemical equipment companies, universities, all the different groups, other NGOs, et cetera. And really what it's about is where we have shared goals and values, and we're willing to put together and secure matches from these groups. But it goes beyond the match, because we want to work in places where in order to overcome obstacles or achieve the goals we want to achieve, none of us can go at it alone. We really want to figure out areas where it will take us together, the private sector, the public sector, the academic community, to work together in order to make progress. So when you think about industry, we've seen an incredible increase in the amount of funding of research by industry. This is just a slide that shows since 1953, this is all research, this is not ag research, across the United States by industry, by others, and by the federal government. And as you can see, and I don't think we have a pointer, but as you can see, in the blue is the federal government, in the red is industry. So there's been an incredible explosion of research done by the private sector, and it's true also in agriculture. So why do we need to engage industry? Because the shift to private and proprietary R&D is happening, and we have to move along with that. So we know that we have great partners with industry. They have great interest in what happens at academic institutions, including basic science, and so we really need to move together in order to accomplish what we want to achieve. So we talk a lot about the pre-competitive space. So where is it? This is the space where we want to work with industry. And so I tried to find a definition of what that pre-competitive space means. Now, there's lots of definitions of the competitive space. So this is a definition of the competitive space, where areas of business in which firms feel comfortable against competitive pressures on the basis of its cost advantage and or its technological leadership. So industry is going to work in the competitive space where they've got game, right? They're going to work where their skills are, where they can go after the products and the services, whatever it is that their products are, and that they're going to be leaders in that area. That allows them to sell a product. So I went and searched for a definition of pre-competitive space, and I said, well, I can't find one, so maybe if I take these blue words and use the opposite, maybe that describes the pre-competitive space. So I did that, and it says areas of business in which a firm feels uncomfortable against unambitious relaxation on the basis of its cost disadvantage and or its technological inferiority. Now that makes no sense, does it? So we have to throw that out. So I then went out to my fictitious friends out in industry and said, what is the pre-competitive space? And I got some quotes back from my fictitious friends. We'll know it when we see it. Whatever it is, it needs an IP agreement. Let's see if our lawyers can define it. Well, it's certainly not out in the field. I had to put out ag joke there. And pre-competitive, isn't that code for bring along your checkbook? So we really don't have a good definition of it. And the first one is somewhat true. We'll know it when we see it. So I came up with my own definition. It really, again, is a place where we can't go at it alone. We have to work together in order to accomplish things, where the outcomes offer no particular advantage relative to peers and where there's a potential to positively impact all parties. And it allows resources and data to be shared. So we're not entering that pre-competitive space just thinking that industry is going to fund us. We're entering that pre-competitive space where the private sector can actually work together on research projects with the academics, with the government together, and where we're all going to share in the benefits of it. And so for the private sector, why would anybody want to work in this space? There's lots of positive aspects of it. First of all, most companies have corporate social responsibility platforms. They can more rapidly develop products where there's those common obstacles. There generally are some cost savings associated with it. They get access to fundamental research. Remember, industry clearly is not going to be able to pursue all that important fundamental research that the government and or academia may pursue. They get access to our experts, to experts in academia and other places, and they bring in students and trainees into their organization. So they're thinking about the next generation. And the public sector gets a chance to address real-world problems, generate research that is transferred quickly to the economy, access resources and data. This is key because when we're talking about big data, this is going to be one of the areas that we're interested in. Access to resource and data otherwise unattainable, and then, of course, access to their excellent scientists. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for these to work. First of all, first and foremost, you have to have the shared goals. If you don't have the shared goals, it falls apart from the very beginning. You have to have shared values, which is honesty. You have to have agreement on the responsibilities for the rules of engagement. So when you're dealing with industry, everyone has to know up front what those rules are going to be. There has to be a value proposition, right? No one's going to enter into this, even though there's no particular advantage to a group. Industry and the private sector is going to have to see some value proposition. There's got to be something that they're going to get out of it. And really, when they talk about those value propositions, they can have trust about it. There has to be synergy, so the goals cannot be achieved by any partner working alone, as we mentioned earlier, and there's got to be skin in the game. So I worked at NIH on a number of projects where in the pre-competitive space, and really if one of the partners did not have skin in the game, did not come with equivalent kinds of resources and or expertise or whatever they were offering to it, they generally left the partnership quite quickly. There has to be joint celebration of success, and of course there has to be shared responsibility for failures. So those are some of the things that make it work. And we are working in this area in the phytobiome. We're working in this area in our phenotyping project, where we're trying to set up networks and or projects that have the private sector right along in the projects. But the other area that we think this can work is in big data. So I was delighted this morning in two talks, and I did not change the slide after I heard it. When we talked about big data, we're talking about valued data, because in agriculture, data doesn't have to be big in order to be valuable. And you know that very well as economists, but it's true across the whole sector. So really what we're going after is valued data. And how do we determine what is valued data? There is so much data out there, and any of those data could be important to any particular project, could be important to any particular farming system, could be important to a producer, could be important to a food processor, to the food industry, et cetera. So how do we determine what this valued data are? And we also then thought about what we do as a small organization. We're a $200 million organization. The USDA spends $3 billion a year in agricultural research. So what is it that we, as FAR, could do to generate a public-private partnership that would allow us to move forward in the area of data? So we had a big data convening event a couple months ago to talk about just some fundamental, foundational things that we might be able to do in the area. And two issues emerged that we think that we will take on working with you in the community. And the first is training. And you heard it today. Everyone is training. Everyone is looking for experts. So is there a way that we can more make an investment in basically our infrastructure and an investment in training at the very foundation in an area we're calling digital agriculture? And this means that we want to have people that work in computational science, statistics, agricultural sciences to be able to be trained with a established curricula that will allow them a diverse training experience, either as a graduate student and or as a postdoc, that will allow them then to be able to navigate and to easily crisscross between this exploding world of digital agriculture that we know. We know we have to be in partnership with the USDA on this, but we also believe that industry will be very willing to help us in the private sector, because there is been a call to us and to the USDA and to others to say we need more people trained and with background in agricultural issues, and as well as in computational sciences and other data sciences. We need that marriage together in order to make this a really, really strong group of individuals coming out that can address these issues. So that's the first thing that we're going to look at. And secondly, when we talk about value data, we don't know what we don't know. So if we don't know what's out there, how do we know if it's value to us? So the second thing that we thought that is very fundamental that we might be able to do is to think about a metadata project and a data discovery project, where we can potentially work towards discovering those data that are out there and those data sets that are out there, to get some metadata about those data sets. So who authors the data sets, what's the known components of the data, how do you get access to those data, and what are some known problems with the data. If we could get some standardization for the metadata and know some more information about what's available, we think if those information are both available to companies as well as to researchers and others, we can make some progress. We also believe that, and those of you here that are from the private sector can talk a little bit more about this, that we believe that industry, from our initial conversations, will be willing in the private sector to provide some metadata into the system. We're not asking companies to give up their data. We're just asking them to tell us about their data. And if there is, for example, if one of the points that we want to know is how you get access to this data, and a company says there is no access, or a company says there can be access upon negotiation, that's good to know, because at least we know what's out there. So we're looking at a way to do this. It could be an enormous big data project in and of itself. So we're trying to figure out if we can do a pilot with a certain number of data sets or of data in a certain area, to see whether or not something like this would be feasible, and also to test the waters of whether or not industry would be willing to come along with us and provide metadata to this data discovery index. So I think my timing was perfect, right?